Hello and welcome to one of the first modules in our Reconstruction Jim Crow unit. This one is going to be led by the person you see in front of you in two different places. The still picture, that's me in my reenacting uniform with my fancy black hat on, and then me down below speaking to you right now. So let's go and get started on what exactly we're going to be talking about. And that is the amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments connected to the Reconstruction Unit. So let's jump out of the PowerPoint and go to a website. And here we are, the same slide you just saw. This is the website where it came from. And you can see just briefly here the 13th Amendment that made slavery illegal. The 14th Amendment that anyone born here became an American citizen. So all these people up here, the African Americans who had been held in slavery, born in the United States, well, they were now citizens. And then the 15th Amendment gave people of all races and beliefs, men that is at this point, women will get the vote later, gave them the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. Going back to our PowerPoint. So the amendments to the Constitution, again, to review here. 13th Amendment. Section 1 of the 13th Amendment gave freedom. In other words, it abolished slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves held by the people then still in rebellion during the Civil War. That only freed some. In fact, some people say the ones that were already under control of the Union were already free. But anyway, as you see there on this slide, the bold red part tells you neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, kind of another phrase for slavery, shall exist within the United States. Now the pictures you see there talk about this freeing, some of the problems that came along with it. For instance, you see over here, people had been sold as slaves. Well, that was not going to be a problem anymore. You see down here some of the punishment that slaves would get. And you see here people starting to enjoy some of those freedoms. But you say, what is this middle part there, Mr. Stevens? It says, except as punishment for a crime. Do you mean you could have slavery for punishment for a crime? Well, not actually slavery. They called it involuntary servitude, in that you'd have to do work against your wish because you were a criminal being held in jail. So let's go look at a picture of exactly what we're talking about. Here you see a bunch of men working on a chain gang. Punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. In other words, these men were convicted of crimes, and as part of their punishment they were out working. In this case it looks like they're breaking rocks on the side of a hill for some purpose. Don't know what it is. I'm not totally certain this isn't a picture from a movie, but still, it shows you what happened. It also shows you something about chain gangs. In this chain gang, all the people you see are white. Well, there were African Americans that were held as convicted for crimes, but back at this time period, they would have been on separate, they call that segregated chain gangs. Now the second section of the 13th Amendment says that Congress shall have the power to enforce this law by appropriate legislation, as in laws that they need to make sure people pay attention to this no more slavery. So what you see here is an example of that. You see the tents and the troops of a Union infantry regiment from the state of Illinois, the 84th Illinois Infantry, camped around the courthouse in Madison County Courthouse in Huntsville, Alabama. Now, stop and think about this logically. Would people in the South had wanted to pay attention to these laws that slavery was no longer allowed if you didn't have the Union Army, the army from the North, down there making them do it? Well, the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery once and for all gave Congress the power to make laws to make sure. And one of the laws they made was to have Union troops, what they called occupying the South. So the next one is the 14th Amendment. Gave citizenship, made freedmen out of men and women who had been held in slavery. No longer were they property, because keep in mind, before this point, the U.S. Constitution held that African Americans were basically property if they were held as slaves, and even the freedmen, the people even in the North, weren't considered citizens up to that point. So as you see there, it says all persons born or naturalized, as in came here as immigrants and then become citizens eventually in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and the state where they reside. So they're citizens of both the United States and the state, such as Maryland, Virginia, New York, wherever they reside. Am I not a man and a brother? So you see, this is part of the symbols that they use to try to get their viewpoint out. And then the last amendment that we call our Reconstruction Amendments, the 15th Amendment, gave the right to vote. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged means limited, by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now that last part, what that means is, legally, you couldn't deny somebody the right to vote because they used to be a slave. The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Same type of thing. So during Reconstruction, you'd have Union troops in the South making sure African Americans' rights to vote was protected. Now I'm sure that you could probably pause. I'm not going to read the article to you, but this is a pretty good article. It's from, I believe it's from the Washington Post. And it talks about this right to vote that was protected back then. You can pause the video and look at that, but you see the little symbol down here reminds you an African American hand putting a ballot into the box to vote. And you say, Mr. Stevens, didn't women have the right to vote? Not yet. Not even white women had the right to vote until later on in U.S. history. So, these three amendments, if you go together, you really want to emphasize this word here. I'm going to highlight it for you. This lets me highlight it. Equal protection under the law. Together, these three amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, 13th, free. 14th, men. Women get the right to vote later. 15th, vote. Now, I didn't come up with that little memory trick. Free men vote. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. I got that from a history professor at George Mason University by the name of Dr. Jane Sensor. And I thought it was a pretty good memory clue trick, a mnemonic device they call it, that will help you remember these amendments. So again, summary. 13th Amendment bans as in does away with slavery in the United States and any of its territories. 14th Amendment grants citizenship to all citizens born in the United States and guarantees equal protection under the law, as in they're supposed to be all treated equally. And 15th Amendment ensures all citizens, male citizens at this time, the right to vote regardless of race or color, or again, remember what previous condition of servitude means, people that used to be held in slavery. So they're specifically aiming the 15th to help African American men who had been held as slaves vote. So, I hope that you had a chance to take good notes. If you need to, rewind this, pause it, do whatever you need to. Make sure you understand these things. These are some of the important points you need to learn. So, we'll talk to you in the next module.